Welcome to BofC Live, the daily video and podcast series of Business of Cannabis. BofC Live highlights the company's brands, people, and trends driving the global cannabis sector. Learn more at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on this BofC Live, we connect with Mike Beaudry. He is the founder and CEO of HERBL Solutions, a leading distributor of cannabis products in California. We wanted to connect with him about his company, about how they started, where they are today, and where they might be going. So enjoy this BofC Live conversation with Mike Beaudry. Mike Beaudry, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jay.
Well, we were just chatting before we came on that we are from the same small sliver of earth in New England. I'm from Boston, you're from Rhode Island. So what brought us to Toronto and brought us to Santa Barbara, well, I don't know if it brought you to Santa Barbara, but we're going to talk about weed today and weed distribution, logistics, serving a market. Is that okay with you?
Sounds great.
Tell us a little bit about HERBL. Tell us a little bit about HERBL. You're the founder and CEO, obviously, but tell us a little bit about the business and a little bit of the origins of the business as well.
Sure. So my background, Jay, is in supply chain distribution. The correlation of really I'd say the genesis of starting HERBL was based out of, I spent 10 years at a company called United Natural Foods, also known as UNFI, New England-based, headquartered company, leading distributor of organic natural products in the country. I was there for 10 years. Close to half of that time, I led operations for the company nationally. And then for 5 years, I was president from 2005 to 2010. Spent another 5 years post that as a CEO of a company that was in dietary supplements. So we did dietary supplements for food, drug, mass, and Costco and Walmart and Sam's, et cetera. In that 5-year period, post UNFI, I started looking at cannabis. I was the kid in high school that smoked more weed than most. And I was fascinated that it may be becoming a legal thing. So in 2014, I spent a lot of time doing some diligence and liked what I was reading and went to a trade show in Vegas, November of 14, completely fell in love, felt like, if this actually is going to happen, it's something I have to be part of. So in the year between November 14 and 15, spent a lot of time just continuing that kind of diligence and from afar. Went back to the trade show in November of 15, fell back in love to the point where resigned from my job in December of 15, moved to California in February of 16, and began the quest. I didn't quite know what that quest would be. I just knew that I felt things were moving very fast. In 1 year's time at that trade show was a tremendous difference. And if I was going to be part of it, I needed to do it. And I strongly felt that it's not something I could miss. So moved to California, to Santa Barbara, California, February of 16, and began what ended up a almost 2.5-year journey, full-time diligence on the cannabis industry in California. So making friends and building relationships, really refining a model, I'd say, of what the business could look like. Certainly started at foundationally understanding the legacy of the industry and all the hard work that went into building, the industry and frankly, paving a road for someone like me to show up. So that was so from February of 16 to August of 18 was that full-time diligence, and then launched the business in August. One building in Santa Rosa, California. Subsequent to that, it's been really 2.5, now almost 3 years of a pretty fast sprint. We've grown to have 5 buildings in 3 different locations in the state of California, with a leading distributor of cannabis in the state. We have a couple of hundred people on the team, 40 trucks, and learned a lot and still learning and still thrilled to be part of this exciting industry.
It's an amazing story. In the diligence component, which was over years and in different places, like, were you saying, this is an industry that is so new, and it does come from legacy roots, but it's so new in terms of commercialization and distribution. And were you looking like none of the normal facets of an industry are in place, right? There's no way to distribute it. There's no way to house it, get it to market. And was it striking, or were you just eyes open saying, we're going to fill some of these gaps and this is how we're going to do it. And
I,
uh,
I I felt like I honestly felt like I went through a time machine when I went to the trade show in November of 14. I felt in some ways it must have been what it looked like in 1980 in the natural products industry, where I spent a decade, small independent brand, really frankly just trying to hustle and grit it out and turn their product into something that was on shelves. And I felt like, if my thesis was basically that if we don't all get arrested, and if this actually turns into an industry that's actually legal, and we can do this, that I felt at the time, and I still believe today, it turns into a much more conventional supply chain, which I have a good amount of experience in. So my whole goal early was to build this team of folks who have deep understanding of cannabis and specific to California, certainly for now. So we've got a bunch of people on the team that have spent many, many years in the cannabis trade, mixed with folks like myself that have, pretty deep experience in scaled supply chains, and put the two together. But that was really that early moment was really the trade show, and then looking in the analogies between the natural products industry and what I thought would become, how cannabis would evolve.
yeah, it's interesting because we talk about a lot on our channel and all of our programming, sort of what is the best analogy of a sector to cannabis, and is it natural products, is it alcohol and beverage, is it tobacco in some components, is it is it pharma, like
Yeah.
or is it a little bit of all those things atop or layered on sort of new regulations, which in many cases I think are burdensome and inefficient, or like, and I guess when you look at it, is it a combination of all those things, or is it exactly like what you thought it would be coming from natural products?
I'd say it's a combination. Early on, I thought it would follow in parallel path extremely close, which, and I think in a lot of ways it does, but I think some of the regulatory aspects of it, the way in which the ground game and sales works in the alcohol industry, as an example, is different than how it was done in the natural industry. So I think it's really a combination of several, but I still feel a extreme strong lean into the natural products, because if you think about the natural products industry, grocery stores were around forever, right? And then spotted and dotted around the country with these little independent natural food stores. Everybody thinks of it today in Whole Foods and go to Costco and see all the organic foods. I was in the space when you couldn't find an organic product at Costco, Walmart, Sam's, et cetera, right? So it wasn't that long ago that it made the shift. So before that, if you were a small independent natural foods brand, you had 10,000 independent natural food stores to sell to. And then you needed a supply chain to support that. So I think looking at it through that lens is where I saw so many of the analogies that I've drawn and parallels that I've drawn over the last 5 years of actually seeing it real live. But I've got a lot of friends in the industry now that have come from other industries, and I do see some of the parallels, that you spoke about.
Yeah. And thinking about the distribution and thinking about California specifically, because it's such a diverse, well, it's a massive state, it's a diverse state geographically, topographically, like almost in any capacity.
Yeah,
It's not
like a
even a small
country.
country, it's a big country.
Yeah.
And thinking about that, like what has been striking about the evolution of the supply chain, of which you're an important part of it? Like, what has been the biggest change from, like, well, the trade show from 2014 to now, but actually since you've been in business, like how professionalized has that supply chain gotten, and in what time horizon?
Massively. I mean, the difference is staggering in such a short amount of time. If you think about 5 years ago in 2016, when I got here, if you went into a dispensary, largely it was still jarred product, selling by the gram or selling by the eighth. And they'd put it into a package, whether it's plastic or a jar, and they'd sell it to you. And there was very few, I'll say CPG type products on the shelf and branded products on the shelf. So I've watched that convert. I watched, vapes became obviously a very large component of the sales. That was virtually none in 2016, or very small. So there's been a lot of changes and a lot of professionalization, I'd say on every level, really the retail level. And I certainly think track and trace and all of the regulatory aspects that come from the legal market have demanded that. But In a very short amount of time, we've seen, it's almost like quantum leaps. It's almost like each quarter of the year, a year goes by, in the industry. So I'd say if you looked at it today, if you came into one of our warehouses, they look largely like a classic distribution of a food warehouse, if you will, climate controlled and same type of racks, smaller versions of them because our products are smaller, high value, smaller in cube and weight. So, but I think what you'd find today in 2021 is a business that largely looks like other, conventional distributors.
Yeah. I want to sort of leapfrog and blue sky a bit because, you're operating in California. It is a massive, it's the biggest market. It is super diverse. It's got the full supply chain like all the states do in their own sort of bubble. Um, but it's impossible not to notice what's happening in DC and actually in other states too. And we're doing an event tomorrow talking about South Dakota. And South Dakota now needs to set up a mini version of what happens in California,
Yeah.
supply chain, all the things,
Yeah.
but with a much smaller market, right? It's much more difficult to do. Like, how would you and your business, but even anybody thinking about it, thinking about a country that is where, imagine it's legal, it can grow where it's best to grow, it can move where it's best to sell, like natural products, actually.
Yeah.
Like how do you, what would be the steps to get to that on a national level? Like how
You
could
know,
you achieve that?
Here's one of the biggest differences, and it's really, if you liken it to alcohol distribution, this is where it gets real similar. That's a state by state regulated industry, and largely, and my understanding is almost every state minus a couple, you have to be within the confines of the state to operate and distribute alcohol within the state. Um, let's just pretend for a second that remains here from a distribution perspective. That would put Herbal or a company like ours with a limited set of markets early on because of the fact that if you think about a liquor distributor, they're going to all of the restaurants, events, liquor stores, et cetera, and there's tens of thousands in a state, right? If you take my home state of Rhode Island, I think there's 5 or 6 dispensaries today. I can't set up a distribution company to service 5 or 6 dispensaries. So there's going to be inherently some differences in how this rolls out. I would think that, a brand, my opinion, ultimately a brand will be able to ship state, across state lines to another state, to a distributor or to a license holder to, bring it to the state, just as alcohol does today. But from a pure logistics and supply chain, I think it's going to be starting at the biggest markets. And then as this thing unfolds, maybe I could envision a future where, certain states work together. So a distributor can, do it like a tri-state or, some type of multi-state format where they could put a distribution center in Connecticut and service New York and Rhode Island and Connecticut type of thing. I would envision something like that. But in the near term, it really, our focus is going to be going across the country and focusing on the larger markets that can support a distributorship early on.
Yeah. And then you think of it almost from the brand perspective of, you look at the, the top 10 sellers in different states and there are brands that replicate. I mean, they're operating in their own little bubbles, but there are brands crossing states. And I
Right.
like in that, like I used to work in Silicon Valley. And there was a Budweiser distributor that had basically the monopoly on Budweiser, and they
Yeah.
also sold Snapple and like all the other things. Like, can you imagine a situation where there's like these distributors, I guess, or these hubs that serve a whole bunch of brands that are
Yeah.
quasi monopolies in this given jurisdiction,
Yeah.
servicing basically just dispensaries first. But imagine events and imagine all the things that the liquor does.
Yeah, that could happen from here. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch it unfold. And so much is going to be really subject to how the regs ultimately unfold. Whether is it truly state by state? Do the feds do something that's a little different than alcohol? Maybe expand it, into something that it's not
Yeah.
defined as state by state. So, but it's going to be a minute to work all that out, I think.
More probably. And it'll be interesting to mark, you're thinking about the trade show in Las Vegas from your first time to well, I think this is going to be in October, like
Yeah.
thinking about that and having leapfrogged a year, having not been in Vegas last year,
Yeah.
like thinking about where the sector will be going back to your early days, 2014, like getting back to Vegas and see what it is. I mean, I think the last one I went to was 2019, and it was a lot of I would say back end machinery. I guess I
Yeah.
was like
Yeah,
shiny
picks and
extraction
shovels.
machines.
Yeah, it was a very picks and shovels type show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wonder if in October it'll be, I don't know what it'll be, but like,
Yeah.
do you have any sense of what it'll be?
I think it'll be, from what I understand thus far, at least, something markedly similar. It is I think, if you think about trade shows, and I spent a lot of time in Natural Products Expo West in Anaheim.
Yeah.
If you think about the trade shows as the large ones grow, especially in a central location or a good location like Vegas, they become an epicenter for meetings more than the trade show floor itself. It's just a great place to go and knock out, a tremendous amount of touch points with people. So, we're not going to actually display at the MJ, but we will have a decent sized team that attends, and we're probably going to do a party. We'll host a party and something fun like that. But
send Mike note.
a Boston type party too. So,
oh, really? Oh, see now.
Yeah, you
now
might like.
Bring my Red Sox cap. Be a whole thing. Sir Fenway Franks. Now we're talking.
No, see, I knew I could get you to go.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate the time. I love learning about the business. Look forward to seeing you in Vegas at the Boston party. But good luck to you as things go from now to then. And as I was saying, as we open up, but certainly as the U.S. is way ahead of us in terms of opening up. But as that happens, and as the industry shifts dramatically, even over the next couple of months.
Yeah, fantastic, Jay. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Good, nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
That was Mike Beaudry, the founder and CEO of HERBL Solutions. If you like this program, please rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you heard the show. It helps support the work we do. Thank you for joining us on BofC Live today. We're able to do what we do thanks to our ongoing partners, including Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, CanDelta, Headset, Gallagher, and Torque & Mains.